Hey, deserving listeners, the Ultimatum, end of the season. Let's watch.
I'm gonna be nice, but I'm gonna be
that sounds familiar.
a little real. There was a night, and we all remember it, where you kind of went MIA, and it was y'all's last night together. You went MIA until like 8 in the morning, which, wow.
Right.
That's a long time. And
All right, so they're going to talk about that night, and I hope the next day. They're currently focusing on the fact he was out until 8 a.m., but that was not the issue for Ray. She explicitly said that it was fine if you wanted to stay out. It was the fact that he didn't reply to my text or answer the phone or anything and just let me know that he's okay. She explicitly said that. She's like, if we just had a pretty heavy talk. I was basically telling him that I didn't know if I wanted to marry him anymore. That was hard on him, and I understand that. And if he needed to get drunk and hang out and maybe spend the night at someone else's house, I would have been okay with that. But why would you, in a hostile manner, refuse to answer your phone? I saw that you had a red dot or a green dot, meaning that your phone was online and on and connected, and yet you weren't replying to my texts. I couldn't fall asleep all night. It's a hostile act. You were doing that on purpose to hurt me, to scare me or concern me, and for you to do that to me, that really hurts. That was her point. So hopefully they don't go down the road of like, what's wrong with Zay that he went out with his friends?
so do you want to shed some light on MIA Zay?
So earlier that day, Ray said that she didn't want to leave, this experience with me. So that was, obviously you in love with somebody that's gonna hurt, and I wanted, I wanted some answers. I asked her all these things like, if you feel this way, let me know why.
Okay, and I hope they talk about I'm just gonna say it, abuse that he committed to Ray for several minutes, for several moments. I mean, I don't know how long it was. Was it 2 or 3 minutes or something? Where she's trying to get away from him. She's trying to leave the apartment. He's refusing to let her go, barring her exit and putting hands on her. And she's repeatedly saying, don't touch me, get off me, don't touch me, leave me alone, let me leave. That's abuse. That could literally be criminal. You can't do that to another human being. If someone wants to leave their house, they get to leave their house. And if someone doesn't want you touching them, and they've said it, especially after the third time, but it was dozens of times she was saying it, then just to review, she says, we hear her saying on camera, but you can't really see her, if you don't stop doing this, I'm going to hit you like I did before, or something like that, indicating that they've been down this road before. And then we skip forward to the next day, and all they talk about is the fact that she hit him, which is very, very concerning to me. Now, I hypothesize that they did have a more explicit conversation, but off camera, about what he did, and Ray did assert that, who knows. But they just agreed, well, let's not talk about that on camera because I don't want to humiliate you on camera. I could see an arrangement like that happening. Or Ray was so afraid and so intimidated or so brainwashed, gaslit, if you will, into believing that she was literally to blame for that situation. If someone comes up to you on the street and starts to grab you and you say, get off me, and you're moving away from them, and you say, stop touching me, stop touching me, stop touching me. 3 minutes later, you're like, get off me, and you hit them, that is justified. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's justified within reason, right? You don't want to kill someone, but you're justified to defend yourself. That's how I would frame it. Again, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know what happened, but we did see enough, and I hope that they address that.
At that point, so I'm asking these things, and she's just not trying to answer. And like, for a situation so serious, I just expect my partner to be like, hey, this, and this, and that. No matter if your stomach hurt, your head's hurt, like whatever the case is, and I didn't get any answers.
Yeah, so he's talking about that moment that was very hurtful to him, and I believe him that it was hurtful. It would make sense it would hurt. And he was asking her to talk about it. He was asking her what's going on in her mind. And what he's saying makes some sense, that even if your stomach hurts, you think you could be able to just say something. Now, who knows? I mean, if her stomach was in a really bad place, it would be really hard to say anything other than my stomach hurts. But it's a pattern in the relationship that he has observed and been requesting that she change, that she's very reserved and doesn't open up and doesn't say anything and will lack eye contact. And that is understandable that he would want some indication, some communication, some contact, some emotional expression, something. Now, there are different sorts of people. We have introverts and extroverts. Introverts are much more internal. They do want to be with other people. There's a myth that introverts are lonely or happy with being alone. No, introverts need attachments just like every other human being. They just are oriented such, and there's a spectrum, right, between introversion and extroversion, that, and it's contextual as well. Like for me, I am in many contexts extremely extroverted, but in other contexts I'm extremely introverted. So it's hard to categorize people in very definitive ways, and people change over time to some extent. But anyway, so she, for introverts, they're oriented more internal. They like to think before they talk. They process a lot. They don't feel compelled to talk. In fact, often it's uncomfortable for them to speak before they've thought, or it's uncomfortable for them to share a lot. For the extrovert, they're uncomfortable keeping things in. They want to talk about things. They want to talk before they think more often, or they want to think as they're talking. They will prefer more talkative, thing. Like an example with me and my wife is, I don't know if she would be okay with me saying this, but she's more introverted than I am. And one example is that when we're walking out of a movie, we both liked it. I want to have a long conversation about it. And she's more internal. She's more thinking about the movie. She's more processing it internally and doesn't have a lot to say outwardly. But there's a lot happening in there, of course, depending on the movie. But for me, it's just like every thought that enters my mind in that situation, I want to say. And when I'm around Umberto, the co-host of this podcast, he's like me in this way. He's very extroverted, more so than me, actually. And when we see a movie, we could talk, as you've seen if you've ever listened to one of our audio podcasts, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about a movie. We could watch a 90-minute movie and talk for 5 hours about it. Because that's how him and I are oriented. We want to hear, we want to talk, we want to think while we're talking, we want to debate, we want to explore, we want to be provoked, we want some sort of person to push against. It's very outward, and there's a lot of enjoyment of that. There's a lot of need for that, whereas introverts don't have that. So for Zay and Ray, they were running into that, and Zay is now talking about that, and there can often be that. Because for the extroverts of the world, they will look at the introvert and say, "You don't love me. That's why you're not, or you don't think of me as important enough to share your feelings, or you don't need me enough." People want to feel needed in a relationship, so it can be interpreted as a rejection when it's not really.
Phone off, my phone died. I was with one of my friends and one of her friends, and I ended up getting drunk and passing out at his house.
So that's the truth.
That's my truth.
That's your truth, that you passed out at a friend's house. I got you. And I feel like you think that something else happened, Ray.
I don't necessarily think it's so much about what he was doing.
Yeah, I don't know why she's asking that question. She's asking a question of, I think you think that he was cheating, essentially. And we never saw an indication that Ray thought that. She was very clear. She was just like, it's okay, but it hurts that you just didn't reply. It was obviously a passive aggression against me. You were trying to hurt my feelings, which makes it even worse.
I think it's just, you should have came home earlier. I don't know.
So right there, I don't know if she has social anxiety or what's happening. There's been some signs that it'd be hard to believe that someone with social anxiety would go on a reality TV show, but who knows? She says a very short little sentence. I'm guessing there's a lot more there that's inside of her. And then Zay starts talking. So I wonder if we'll ever get to what Ray is experiencing. And I'm worried we're never going to get to the abuse that happened.
At that point, I can't, in my head, I'm just thinking, what is Like, I'm asking you in the nicest way possible, and I'm communicating to you the way that you told me to communicate with you.
Right.
I'm doing that. I'm changing.
Okay, good. So, and Ray is acknowledging that, yes, you were talking to me in the way that I was asking you to. And this is an agreement that I will make with a lot of couples where the Zays of the world will, not always, but sometimes be extremely intense, and they'll raise their voice. And you could argue that you should never do that. But sometimes the Zays of the world, if they're with someone else that does that, like a Shanique, for example, then it could work, but it also could be very volatile. It just kind of depends on how they manage it. The point is that some people, when they raise their voice, they're not actually hostile, they're just intense. And other people will be like, oh my God, you're yelling at me, when it's like, no, I'm not yelling at you. I'm just, I don't know, this is just how I talk. Now, some people are unaware of their hostile tone, it's rare that we're ever aware of our tone, by the way. If anyone ever accuses you of tone, believe them, because it's in all likelihood, it's they've not said anything for a long time and they can't take it anymore, and now they're saying something about your tone. So you want to believe that. But some people, they're not having tone, they're just intense anyway. So I think what they're saying is that Ray was telling Zay, you have to lower your voice, otherwise it triggers me or I want to escape. And he says, I was trying to do that, and he was in that instance. And he's saying, and yet I still didn't get anything out of you. Let's see what she says.
Crying like I'm freaking on this freaking, in this experience, crying my freaking eyes out, like I'm like.
And we're different people. I have a hard time expressing myself.
When you love somebody, that's not
true, Ray, 100%. But you understand that if your partner is crying and you care, it doesn't take much to say, I'm sorry, or to have eye contact. Now, I've talked about avoidant attachment. I'll talk about it briefly. That when you are raised in a way that has consistent emotional neglect or lack of warmth, you shut down because there's no point in reaching out. And then as an adult, neurologically, it's actually hard to face people. It's hard to have eye contact because it frustrates the individual, because to have eye contact is to be open to them, and to be open to them is to be vulnerable yourself. To be vulnerable yourself is, they believe, a surefire way to be rejected. And so it's just better just to be independent. I'm going to turn away from people. I don't need people. I'm going to shut down my emotions. But the emotions are there, is the thing. For the avoidant person, all the emotions are there, sometimes to an exaggerated degree because they've never been allowed to express them, but they're not in connection with them. And so you can, as a result, even have a lack of ability to be empathetic, because one of the main factors in having empathy is noticing your own emotions. When your partner is hurting and crying, if you're in connection with your gut and your heart, you will actually feel their pain. I'm sure you all have experienced that, where someone falls on the ground and your knee hurts, or you're watching a show or someone crying, and even though it's not you that's suffering, you start to cry. That's because we're social creatures, mirror neurons, all that kind of stuff. And so in order to have empathy, in order to really understand what someone else is going through, you have to be in connection with your own feelings, because those feelings will be provoked automatically when you're watching someone else have those feelings. And so if you cut off yourself from your feelings, then you won't notice the fact that you're feeling something, and thus won't have empathy, if that makes sense. And then you will come across cold. I've worked with a lot of people like Ray. I don't know her precisely, of course, but a lot of people with this presentation. And it looks as though they're cold. It looks as though they don't care. It looks as though they're uncaring or mean or ignoring of other people. But often what's happening is they're in a constant state of anxiety. And they don't look like it because it's kind of just their baseline. And they're just trying to survive, essentially. But it comes across like they don't care.
No question. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to shrink up because there's people in the room. And yeah, you're right. We're different people. But at the end of the day, if you love somebody and really care about somebody, you'll say it in front of anybody. It's about reassuring the person that you're supposed to be in love with.
Yeah, everything that Zay is saying is accurate and healthy and true, and I've been saying what he's been saying throughout my entire career. Absolutely. And I will repeat what I was saying earlier when we watched the scene where he was being abusive, that this illuminates the reality of the vast majority of people who commit abusive behavior, that they are caring, loving people who you could relate to. We have this notion that abusive people are monsters, and some are, but very few are. Most people who do abusive behavior, you can, in fact, a lot of people who commit abusive behavior are very emotionally aware and very sensitive and very loving. So the reason why we want to know this is, one, if you're a clinician, so you can, break yourself of the myths so you can actually assess people accurately and help them. But also, if you're in a relationship with someone and they're abusing you and they're also very loving, it might be very confusing because you have this notion that, well, they don't fit the prototype or the stereotype of someone who's abusive, and it will deny you the opportunity to recognize what's really happening. The other thing is that if you are a loving person with empathy, that doesn't mean that you aren't abusive sometimes. So I think that's what's happening. I don't know, but we use this as a jumping off point to talk about more general issues, and that's what I'll say.
The person, or you don't want to be with that person. But I just needed to hear from you, from your mouth, what you wanted and how you felt.
And I'm sorry for that. And I wanted to be able to express myself because you deserved that. Like, you deserved for me to be open with you. But I couldn't do it. And I'm sorry. But
yeah, she's saying it the way that a lot of people, in order for the Rays of the world to convince you of a solid, understandable, relatable reason as to why they're not expressing themselves, they have to express themselves. You understand the catch-22. So their explanations, if you get any, as to why they're not expressing themselves will be lacking of expressing themselves. And the way she's talking, she understands. She's like, yes, you're right, but it's really hard I can't do it. And with exploration, sometimes I will find that for some people, they will have a visceral physical reaction as they have an urge to express themselves that results in them not even physically being able to talk. There will be people who will report feelings that their throat will close up, or their lungs will deflate, or they'll just feel almost paralyzed because of the traumas they went through early in life when they did express themselves. And I'm guessing let's rewind that, because the way she describes that is very telling.
And I wanted to be able to express myself because you deserved that. Like, you deserved for me to be open with you. But I couldn't do it. And I'm sorry, because you deserved more from me emotionally. You called me out in the beginning for not being able to express myself. And I was like, no, you're crazy. Like, I'm so warm. I'm so affectionate. I am expressive.
Yeah, a lot of people like Ray will believe that about themselves because they feel it on the inside. And there are examples where they are expressive and warm, but they don't recognize that it doesn't come out of their face or body or whatever. It's not visible. They're feeling the warmth, but they're not communicating the warmth. And it feels to them like they are communicating it, when they absolutely are not. So I'm guessing that's what she's getting at.
And then even watching it back, I was like, what the f***? Like, I was so cold and like shut down. I couldn't talk to you. And I'm watching myself sitting there on the bed, and you were like, I want this with you. I want to be engaged with you. And I knew how I was feeling in that moment, but on camera, like, I'm just sitting there like this, like just looking.
Yeah, wow. What a revelation for her that this show would provide. And what we could all, I'm getting chills just thinking about what kind of help therapeutically this show provided for her, because she's like, no, I identify as a warm, expressive person. And when I remember that moment on the bed, I would have told you I was expressive. But when I watched the show, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just dead. There's nothing there. I had no idea. That is commonly the problem. Not only just for all of us in terms of we don't know how we come across other people until we see it. Just as a side example, as a therapist, we're supposed to evaluate ourselves and film ourselves frequently to get to know how we're coming across other people. And, and I'd done it throughout my career at various different points, but mid-career, so this is 10, 15 years into my career, I filmed myself in a session with a client, of course, get permission, that kind of thing. And when I watched it back, I was astonished at how stoic I seemed, how blank I looked. And in the moment, I thought I had a very welcoming face. Now, when you watch yourself, you tend to be more critical than is reasonable, but there was something there. And I remember thinking, that's how I'm coming across. That's what I look like when people are telling me their deepest, darkest secrets. Like, I've got to change that. And so I actually learned, like, I've got to change, like, my demeanor. I've got to develop a new habit in terms of how I listen to people. So anyway, she is recognizing that now, which could be very, very helpful for her.
At you. And it was so weird to see that. And I'm sorry for that.
I think it was really powerful to hear.
And good. I mean, how often do we see people on any of these shows say things like that? I'm always curious about that. I'm thinking, if you rewatch your stuff, wouldn't you, like, realize some things of, like, whoa, like if you watch 90 Day Fiancé, you know, the Kim and Usman thing, from the very beginning, I had been thinking that Kim would later on, if she watched herself, she would be mortified. I don't know why I thought that. I believed that Kim wasn't completely unreasonable as an individual. We watched to the end of the season, the tell-all, all that stuff. Kim says nothing along those lines. And I'm like, wow, I guess Kim is totally proud of that behavior where she's forcing someone to have sex with her. Yikes. But then someone sent me a interview with Kim that I haven't watched yet, but they said, and I might have already reacted that and posted it, by the way, by the time this video airs, and someone was saying that Kim actually says that she was mortified by her behavior. I don't know to what extent, but I am often wondering what people think about when they watch themselves, what they learn, what they have vowed to change, you know, because there could be some huge revelations around that. I guarantee you, if you filmed yourself having a conflict or a tense conversation with your partner, you would be mortified with your behavior. The way it feels is very different from the way it is, from the way it's, you know, the way we're coming across to people. So good for her for recognizing that, for, in no uncertain terms, apologizing for that, for taking full responsibility. She says, you're right. I was wrong. I didn't realize it. I'm telling you, I thought I was fine, but watching it, obviously I'm not, and I apologize to you. I can see where you're coming from. So, you know, good on her for being able to say that.
The cast, watching yourself and how you think you're thinking, that was really, really vulnerable. Ray, thank you, to say, I wanted to give you all of that, Zay. And I know you can roll your eyes for a minute, but from a woman's perspective, to know what you're thinking and how you're feeling in your core, and then to see yourself going, wow, I look I
don't know why everything has to be gendered. The host is saying, for a woman to what is that? What does being a woman have anything to do with what we're talking about, right? Like, men don't care, or, I mean, so who knows? But I could imagine a bias or a sexist idea that women are more volatile or something, or more unreasonable. I don't know. But I don't know, why did you have to say as a woman?
That Ray and Zay, while you guys came in together and glued, you now know you're not meant to be together. Before a marriage, before a messy divorce, before kids are involved, before any of that.
Like, it is what it is. You know, we went our separate ways, and, you know, live your life. I'm gonna live mine. I learned what I need to.
Okay, so quick update. I just went to the doctor, and now I'm back, and the dermatologist burnt something off my face with liquid nitrogen and another thing here. So that's why I have those weird spots. So
And you accused me of doing that with Jake, and you were very rude in the way that you accused me about doing that with Jake, because that's not what it was about. You were the only guy that never sexualized me, and we actually did have a genuine connection without that, and that's why this was so important to me and why I learned so much from you. I'm pissed at you.
Okay.
All right, so Ray is unloading, which is, I think, justified. She's saying, and I believe it, that Zay was freaking out about, did Ray get together with her person that she was dating during the trial marriage period? And meanwhile, he had gotten together with Shanique and didn't volunteer that. Maybe he was even coming across like it hadn't happened. It sounds like Ray is saying that Zay, even after the trial period he was continuing to badger her and be rude to her and that sort of thing, be jealous, which we could imagine. And that fits with the way he presented. Often people who have those kinds of behaviors, they have greater jealousy, they have greater attachment insecurity, they have greater relational traumas, they have greater reactivity to the prospect of losing a partner, and then they convert it to anger and control. And it sounds like she endured that and suffered from that and is now voicing that. Let's see. And I have faith in Zay. He has the ability to be mature and kind. So let's see what he says here.
You should have told me.
Okay, I understand that.
And you flipped out every time I spent time with her instead of telling me why. You let me have a friendship with her.
Do you want? I don't think you like. I know.
Don't attack me.
I'm not attacking you.
I have a right to be frustrated.
I accept full responsibility.
Okay, so he's saying that phrase that we'll often hear on these shows, I take full responsibility. Is he really going to take full responsibility? Is he going to demonstrate that he's remorseful? So let's see what he says here.
For what we did, I totally do.
All I want to hear from you right now, please say, don't attack me, don't deflect right now, because you always deflect. You always fucking do this.
I wish Ray would kind of let him talk, because maybe he can rise to the occasion. But Ray knows him a billion times better than we do, and maybe she's like, no, he's going to turn this around. I think for Ray, regardless of what Zay is doing right now, this is an unspoken anger that she has been experiencing for a long time, and she's finally able to communicate it, maybe because she's emboldened by the show or something. So, yeah, now hopefully she can let Zay talk, because let's see if he can actually rise to the occasion.
I totally do.
All I want to hear from you right now, please say, don't attack me, don't deflect right now, because you always deflect. You always fucking do this. You always deflect.
Do you want to go there?
Don't raise your voice at me. You're not going to make me back down this time. You always yell over me and you want to threaten me. For once, you're actually in the wrong and you're trying to flip it like this on me, but I finally stand up for myself.
This is interesting. I am not sure what's happening. She seems to be not reacting to what's really happening. I would suspect it's because she's reacting to past experiences with Zay. She could literally have PTSD from her experiences with him. I don't know, but it would fit given the signs that we've seen. At the very least, given her introversion and for whatever reason she will shut down in situations, she's had a lot of unexpressed feelings and a lot of pain, and that could all be triggered right now, and she's just distressed in this moment and not really taking the time to notice what's happening right now. But this also could indicate that there's more to the picture than she's a victim of Zay's issues. And I've contended that from the beginning, because I noticed that they were both triggering each other. She was, as she would shut down or be quiet and think, maybe that's the way of putting it, as she would contemplate and think quietly, it would trigger him to talk more. He would get more intense. She would shut down more. And that's a very common dynamic that I'll see in couples. So I know that she plays a part in that, but I just wonder what else is going on behind the scenes now that we're seeing this sort of thing. Having said that, like I said before, if she has been enduring a lot of, shall we say, intimidation from him, or strong words, unfair dominance verbally, emotionally, then it would make sense that she would have some kind of a reaction to that now that she feels safe enough to express that. But hopefully she'll, I don't know, I'm guessing this is going to go nowhere, because on these shows they typically don't really let it breathe. but hopefully she can let Zay talk, because I think he was going to apologize.
I can stand up for myself,
Did I
and
not
why I couldn't talk
accept-
to you,
did
and
I not
I'm standing
accept
up
it?
for
Did I not
myself,
say
and you're
that?
yelling and talking over me.
Jake, you sitting there looking at me. Did I not just say I accept full responsibility? Did I
You
not
said
say
you
that?
accepted it while you were counterattacking me.
No, I'm
Zay,
gonna
do you
say-
think that you should have come clean
What the
about what happened?
is wrong with you?
I'm sincerely apologizing. Watch out, fam.
Yeah, it's upsetting. I think that there was an opportunity there for some healing, for some understanding, for some growth. And Ray had a volcano explosion of pent-up emotions. And as I've been saying from the beginning about people with avoidant attachment style, they will often come across like they're cool as a cucumber, everything's fine, they can seem robotic, they seem shut down, like they have no emotions. But as I've been saying, underneath it all is a vast sea of unexpressed emotions that are just dying to come out. And then if you don't let them out and don't process and think about them and get help for them, this sort of thing will happen where you're just not even rational. And I'm wondering if Ray will watch this scene now and have another thing that she will cringe at herself about, that she'll see the scene where she's shutting down and say, like, that is not how I remember it. Wow, I can't even believe how blank I look. Then she watches this, she's like, oh my God, I thought I was completely justified in that moment for standing up for myself, but that wasn't really standing up for myself. And I don't know what she'll say, and I'm not even really sure what's happening right now because I'm not in their relationship. But I've talked about this before, but I found over time that there are 3 steps to assertiveness. Assertiveness meaning that you're able to express your needs and feelings within reason while taking into consideration the other person within reason. The first phase often is where you're a doormat and you're a people pleaser and or you shut down, which we saw Ray doing. The second phase that I'm trying to get people to is what we might call the terrible twos or the terrible fours phase, where you just oppose everything because you just are trying to say, no, I draw a boundary. And for children, they go through this phase, they're trying out a new skill, which is, wait, so I can say no to things? Or wait, so I'm different from my parents? What does that mean? Does that mean I'm just like opposed to everything that they are and what they want from me? And of course, we go through that phase when we're teenagers usually as well. And if you were never allowed that sufficiently, then as an adult, you might be shut down and a people pleaser. But as a therapy, so what I found was, when I would try to help people move towards assertiveness, they would have this midway point that I would think, which is what Ray is doing, I think right now, which is asserting her feelings and thoughts, but not taking into consideration the context or the other person's feelings. And when I saw that at first, I thought, oh, this is a problem. Like, both of those are bad. The shutdown doormat is bad, and the screaming at people and just opposing people is also bad. But what I found over time was that's a necessary phase in between getting to mature, differentiated assertiveness, because we need to, as people, be able to feel, we need to feel safe in and able and skilled and practiced and used to saying no to someone and to opposing someone and to expressing what's on our mind, even if it might bother other people. Until we feel safe, we will tend to shut down. If we feel a little bit safe, then a lot of emotions will come just pouring out because we're not used to modulating that. We're not used to regulating those things. But that takes time with practice. And so I will, with the Rays of the world, actually encourage them. And I'll tell the Zays, we're going through a step-by-step process. And so you're going to have to endure a fair amount of opposition. And because if you reject, and they're not in a relationship anymore, so it doesn't really matter, but if you reject it or shut it down or get overly reactive to it, which would make sense because you're being yelled at, then if you react against that, it'll cause that person to go back to being a doormat, which we're not trying to do. So you have to be able to interpret it well. Now, there's within reason, right? We don't want the Zays of the world to become verbally abused because the other person is going through assertiveness training. But it does help to if you give the Zays of the world a context like this, they're like, oh, okay, I just need to endure this because I do want them eventually to get to a place where they're assertive, which is the ability to state what's on your mind while also taking into consideration the other person's feelings.
You could have told me instead of attacking me every time.
Let me get a fucking break.
Often when people do this, they are in a state of high distress, and this is their way of trying to, regulate their emotions. They are sitting there, he's being attacked and he's escalating, he's getting frustrated, and he might have some impulses to just go off, who knows, but he knows I have to separate or else I'm gonna freak out, or I don't know what to do, I'm kind of panicking, and I'm guessing that's what's happening.
Hear your lessons, and I know that at times it hurts. Like, I'm really happy for you, Ray. You found yourself. And you guys can rehash this in your own private time. Or not.
No.
Then that's great. What I do know is that you came out of this finding yourself. And you came out of this knowing where you're gonna move on to.
All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.